All right. Be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you for joining. My name is Matt Simmons, President of SimTech Solutions, and I am excited to be here today to share our work. It's been a long time coming, but Show the Way is now at a stage where we can be using it year round to gather information for the point in time count. And so that's if you don't use Show the Way, some of these lessons learned, you can apply potentially to your own work. But I just want to celebrate that, celebrate my team. Thank you to everyone that's here from SimTech for all the hard work that went into the last release. So for those of you that are Show the Way users, we did have a version 3, release 5 drop on Friday. Well, it was pushed live yesterday ahead of this, but we've got some new features, a lot of quality of life improvements, but really excited to get this out. And then version 4 is not too far behind, and that's going to be released in conjunction with the switch over to the new HUD data standards, which are supposed to happen on 10/1, October 1st. So, but again, we're just waiting for the final on that piece. But without further ado, let's just jump right in. Please use the chat as far as if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. The team is going to be monitoring what those questions are. We'll pause occasionally for to come off mute. We have a good group here, really diverse as far as where everyone's from. We've got some smaller rural communities. We've got some larger cities, West Coast, East Coast, some in the center. And, some of you are existing clients for the point in time count. Some of you use the Counting Us app and Show the Way. And some of you are all-in clients, meaning you also use the warehouse as well as the professional services. And some of you, we're just meeting for the first time. So anyway, thank you all for joining us and for letting us geek out a little bit with you and be innovative and be brave. Because I feel like that's what we need to do in order to really affect change in this world. And so some of that's going to take some leaps and some innovation, but we're going to do it. So quick agenda. This was all on the registration, so I don't need to review this. And I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep going forward. Highlights of our approach. So this is in relation to Show the Way. So really the important difference is we're really working hard to foster connections with people over time. So for those of you that have done the point in time count, there's a survey. Oftentimes there's some communities only do an observation tally, but it feels shallow when you leave one of those interviews and you ask people all about their demographic information, their challenges, disabling conditions, domestic violence, et cetera, and then you walk away. Well, with outreach, we have a chance to not walk away. We have a chance to connect with people, build up a relationship over time, get to know the person like you do in any human interaction. Like your best friend at one point was probably a stranger. So your significant other at one point was probably a stranger. The same thing happens in any human relationship. You don't start off day one and get to know everything about them. And you're the one holding the clipboard or the pen, asking all the questions. It really is a progressive approach. You start to build a relationship. Start to build trust. You show up. That's part of life too, is just showing up and being there. And when someone asks you for something, if you deliver, they start being more comfortable with you. And so part of our work is to show up and to document that people are showing up and allow people to go on vacation, to be sick, et cetera. And if you can't show up, someone else will do it for you. And so how do we foster those connections between different outreach workers, different providers, not just always just outreach. It could be first responders. It can be librarians, park rangers, other people in the community that come in contact with our unhoused population. And we also want to make sure that we're putting the person that needs the help at the center of the journey. It's their journey. We're just there to guide them. So what that means is we also are opening up doors for them to request assistance for themselves or on, on behalf of someone else. And it could be also be for an encampment. So it's not just requesting help for me, it's requesting help for my friend. It's requesting help for that we have an encampment over here that needs to, it's in a dangerous spot. So there's different ways to get people interacting with the system. So how does that relate to our work today? So the point in time count, why it's important. We're going to do annual trends with it. We're going to do community planning. We're going to guide our resource allocation. So a lot of communities, they use that to figure out what the demonstrated need is according to the data. HUD and Congress and the Office of Management Budget use the figures from the annual homeless assessment report to help get the budget that we use from HUD, but also these states do the same thing. So they use the point in time count as a resource to say, this is where our problem is, it's the extent of it. We need to then go and try to get X dollars from our budget to put towards homelessness. We can use it to target street outreach and also quantify how much outreach we need. It's a great research tool. As far as HMIS goes, HMIS is also a great research tool as far as the data set, but it's partial. The unsheltered data capture is not complete, and there's always tends to be significant data quality issues. And so that's one of the things that we're working to circumvent with Show the Way. Coverage rates and coordinate entry for HMA. So we have the point in time data. We have data in HMIS, both through the coordinate entry projects and HMIS in general, all in intakes and enrollments. We can see if there's a gap. We can use the point in time information to see how comprehensive we are especially for unsheltered population. But also sometimes people have providers that aren't participating, and we can support them as well. So the other part of it is just to raise awareness in the community that homelessness is an issue, and how many people are there that we need to help. But it's also a chance to get people out of their comfort zones. So oftentimes waking up early in the morning and going somewhere that's not in their daily routine and helping out. And it's a chance to connect with the people that you're surveying. So on the benefits of it, so about surveys. So when I say surveys, the benefits of doing the surveys. So some communities will do just a blitz count, and there's some larger ones, like the largest in the country does a blitz count. So LA, and there's shortcomings to that approach. When you have such a significant problem like LA or so New York, some of the ones that have really high prevalence rates, oftentimes that's the fallback. Well, we don't have enough people to do surveys. If you do it right, you will have enough. And let me explain. So when you do a survey-based approach, here's the advantage of why you do it. So a better chance to actually understand the homeless population and its characteristics. You can't look at someone visually and say, well, that's a veteran. This is all their disabling conditions. And yes, you can do a sample size. We're gonna survey 1,000 people, and we're gonna apply what we got from that 1,000 to the whole. But oftentimes it's bias in that kind of strategy, because you tend to have sample sites that you go to that might be more predisposed for a certain population than another. So oftentimes youth hang out by themselves, for example. They tend to congregate. So veterans might be near VA resources. So there's also people tend to be in the communities where they were last housed. And so you might see racial and gender disparities if you're just going to sample sites. And part of that is like, well, where'd you pull that from? What's that anecdotal evidence? And part of that, I'll flesh out. We have an opportunity to prove that with the data. So you're also not assuming housing status. So as far as implying demographics, one of the things HUD doesn't, in the past it said, we don't want you to imply someone's, age or gender or race, but you're also implying someone's housing status with an observation tally. So with a survey, first question, where are you sleeping tonight? Or if it was even in the morning, where did you sleep last night? Unless you can observe it. So fewer assumptions about the data. We can support community-specific questions that might help lead, you might be going for grants for certain things. You might want to really flesh out certain target populations. You know, we always say custom questions. You're going to add them, make sure you're going to use them. So, but we'll get into details there a bit. So last address can help combat NIMBYism as an example. If we want to focus on target population, vets, chronic, youth, elders, we can do that. Easier to duplicate because we have the information we need. And then it really is, again, it's a chance to engage people. If you're just walking by counting someone, you're not engaging them. And then the other benefit is HUD through the, and you'll see it in the Hick and Pitt notice, the housing inventory chart and twin time count notice that produce sometimes every year, sometimes they'll just refer back to the year before. They give a little bit of leeway when it comes to a survey-based count, which you don't get if you do a blitz count. So you can go in the 7 days past the count to actually keep surveying people. Disadvantage of the survey-based approach: requires more surveyors, takes more time. We can address that. One of the things that we've done is we've been working with some of these larger communities. These ones all happen to be in California. But if you look at the percent increase, when we insert this concept of jurisdictional leads, which is basically someone from the smaller cities or towns, the districts, to take ownership of the count in their smaller area, so not the whole continuum of care, we get more buy-in. We get more from all levels. We get buy-in from the government officials. We get buy-in from the outreach workers, from general citizens. We can't do that from here. Like, I can't do that from my desk and get the same recruitments that you can. And at a county level or COC level, it's really hard for you to do that too. So to spread out the work, have everyone have some local ownership, and the sum of all the puzzle pieces is going to give you an effective count. But I mean, if you just look at the increase in surveyors, you can tell that there's something there about this. I mean, that's just staggering. So part of our approach before we get into the count, which relates to the work with Show the Way, is we need known locations. We need to know where people are. And there's a myriad of reasons for this, but really it's like, where are we going to send people? Like, you don't have to send people everywhere. I mean, they say it's a full canvas, but there's areas that you just know where people are, and there's areas where you know people aren't. And so we can use the density patterns that we gather in the days leading up to the count to figure out where we need to send volunteers, how many we need to send to different places, and how many gift cards and incentives we need to send, and go from there. Now, the picture on the right is from our command center. There are some communities that just don't have enough volunteers to go everywhere. So what we do is what's called geographic sampling and enumeration. And in this case, the areas shaded in orange are high probability areas we're going to go cover those areas. The areas in blue and the areas in white are low probability areas. So what we do is a random selection of those low probability areas, and those are the ones designated in blue. And we take the data from the low probability areas and we enumerate, using stats towards the areas we don't cover. And that's a statistically reliable estimate that still can produce, because if you have a sample size large enough, it's reliable. And that gives you more of an accurate count than pretending you canvassed the whole thing when really you've got a bunch of zeros because you didn't canvass certain areas. And one of the advantages too of known locations is we can create really two different counts in one. We can take the large encampments, and some of them don't have the same mobility. I mean, if you have sweeps happening all the time and people are moving around, that's different. But if you have some encampments where you tend to have the same population that have been living there for a while, you can gather information from the people in those encampments now and take attendance towards the day of the count. And what that means is you can really minimize how much data capture you need to do on the count, because you've already done it. It's like not waiting to do your homework until late on Sunday night when you have it's due on Monday morning, if you had all week to do it. And right now you've got all week to do it. And that's the part we want people to get comfortable with. You have the time. You got to get to know your population is the problem. So interaction is the other part of it. So I got into this space years ago. I mean, it's been a bit. So some of you know me. Like I saw some friends in Massachusetts. So I started off in Massachusetts. This is actually a slide that I love to share. It's when I first started, really, and it was Father Bill's in Mainspring. At the time, it was Father Bill's place in Quincy, Mass. And what we were able to do is when they were over capacity from the fire department was, saying we have to shut you down if you keep taking more people, a faith-based organization. I was able to work with my friend, John Yazwinski, and to get access to the data, created the first HMIS data warehouse in the country, and created the first prioritized by name list off of the data that he provided that was gathered in their HMIS, which they didn't have the reporting and analytics out of it. I'm a finance guy. I understand supply and demand economics and how to code. I applied that to HMIS data, and we found out the small cohort, so less than 7% of the population, were consuming over 40% of the bed nights. And why that's important is because if you can allocate your supply and your resources to the people that are frequent flyers, the high demand people, you're going to free up capacity for the others behind them. So it's staggering. So in this case, we ended up, putting 12 women into a single room occupancy in a former shipyard building, and we saw the numbers drop by 12, the net utilization. And this same kind of construct can apply to the unsheltered population. So in this case, it's for a high turnover emergency shelter, or people were using it as permanent supportive housing, almost permanent housing, and sports minimum. Where you can apply those same constructs to court entry, to the population that live on the streets, and then figure out how you're going to target resources with your overall homeless population. So the question really, and this kind of resonates, for those of you that, my work is one thing, but, this was Dr. Culhane's work. Malcolm Gladwell featured it in the Time, and then it became part of Tipping Point. The point being is there was a Murray Bar, as an example, and this is like at the high end, out towards Reno, was costing the community over $1 million over its duration of homelessness. And so they use the transaction costs, all those interactions, to quantify them, to demonstrate that it would be cheaper and more humane to provide Murray with housing. And so that's in this world that we're in right now, we have to get people on both sides of the aisle. And from my perspective, we have a better chance of doing that if we can demonstrate it's cheaper to do the right thing. So identifying known locations, how do we do that? So the easiest thing that most people are used to doing is using the known location survey and counting us. So while it's in pre-count mode, you can drop known location pins. It's really a one question survey. Some people are adding a little bit more to it now, like in some areas where it's dangerous, for example, potentially, do we need security to go into this area? So that might be a question. Sometimes it's also like a language thing. They're like, do we need a special language, person that speaks this particular language in this area? And, we can, that way, when you go to do the count, you can tailor that. But oftentimes it's just this one question: how many people in a spot? You drop it a pinpoint 3, and it goes on a map. Right. So we use the time between now and then to do that. Simplest thing to do. So it's a free offering when you sign up for using our point in time technology. It's an easy way to make people use the app. You know that they downloaded the app, they register for an account, and they're good to go. So that part's good, and you can use all this data for pre-planning. So if you have existing GPS data sets, we can work with those too. So it needs latitude and longitude. That's the GPS coordinates. A street address can't, sometimes we can convert it, but oftentimes you can't because it tends to be garbage. If you're going to use street addresses, it needs to be something that you would actually send mail to. It can't be like behind the school, it's or Main Street. It has to be like an actual physical address. But here's some potential data sources for that. If you're going to do that, just send a zip file, no identifiers. We just need the coordinates, and you can send that to our help desk, which is pit@syntechsolutions.com. We'll get it loaded up, and you'll have non-location data from that. All right. So with Show the Way, this is an opportunity to get your interactions and your locations throughout the year. All right. So you can download it. For those of you who have so it's a licensed product. We can now proudly say that Show the Way is an HMIS compliant mobile app. And that's huge, because what that means is that you can use Show the Way in your community. It can produce the HUD CSV. Even if you already have an HMIS, It can produce the HUD CSV out of it. We can give that back to your HMIS vendor, and they can ingest the data. If they have any issues doing that, you can take their data from any HMIS in HUD CSV exchange format. That's the way the data is supposed to be structured. Bring it into our warehouse, homelessdata.com. Bring the show the way data into the warehouse. We can bring it together and we can create all the federal reports, the by name list, the performance analytics, everything there. So either your vendor can do its job and receive data, or we can do it for them. And all vendors, because of supportive services for veterans families and the RIMUS grants, they have to be able to produce HUD CSV format. And then the benefit of this is administrators can watch in real time what's going on throughout the community. And so what that part of like the difference between us and the HMIS software is we recognize early on that outreach is not something where you get to know everyone on day one. And so the user experience versus the design is different. So the design with HMIS is a full-blown enrollment. So you're going to do an intake, you get the demographics, you do a program entry, it is an ongoing assessments, and then there's an exit. That's not how, if anyone's ever done outreach or work with people to do outreach, that's not how the world works. You start to build your trust, you build a comfort over time. So, and the other part of it too is HMIS 2004 data standards compared to now have not changed that much. Those old standards were written with the intent to provide Congress and OMB, Office of Management Budget, details about how the funds were being spent. That's different than saying we're building a system to help people. And so that you have to take that into consideration. We don't even ask people what they need. Think of that in HMIS. We don't ask them what they need. So how can we say, like, what's the notes threading? What's the coordination? It's not meant for that. It's almost like if you're an accountant doing taxes versus a financial advisor. They're two different things. So your APRs are your taxes. And we can do that as a byproduct, but that's not the goal. So again, we support a progressive engagement model and not the full intake on day one, because that's just not reality. And then, we meet them as a byproduct. So as far as the features go, case management, encampment management, we have a community care hub, which I'm stoked to share, HUD reporting. So that's part of the homelessdata.com data warehouse. So now that we've got show the way, feeding data into our own warehouse that we've been managing for years, that already had the HUD reporting because some vendors couldn't do the reporting, so we had to do it for them and clients were, some of you actually were in that picture when we were doing that, in that sense that vendor X, not to name names, couldn't do the reports. Client said, "Hey, Matt, we can't meet our federal reporting deadlines. Can you help us out?" We built the reports. We have to invoice for our work. They send the invoices back to their HMIS vendor. HMIS vendor gets enough of these invoices, says, "Can you just do all the reports for us?" So we already have in our warehouse all the HUD reports. But now with Show the Way, feeding data into the warehouse, we've got the front end data capture and the HUD reporting all together. So beyond that, we have by name lists. When I say by name lists, we have the inflows and outflows. We can use the transactional data for prioritization. We also have performance monitoring and evaluation tools. So we've got dashboards, performance evaluation scorecards that you can use for the NOFO process that some of you actually do use. So in the part of that is it's rating all their providers based on community-based scoring criteria and then ranking them. And we have the tools to automate it. There's some manual questions, some things like, do they show up at COC meetings? And this is one I love to drive home. Do they show up at the point in time count? Do they have staff that are part of the point in time count? Because that's how you show you're part of the community. You show up. And so if you start putting some of that into your scoring, you're going to get more buy-in because you're like, there's an incentive here for you to be there. So recording service is provided. Basically, we can't have to, and this is a challenge. We have to categorize every kind of service you can possibly think of in a way that's structured to meet different reports. And so we allow for customization of how the tiles are set up. So it's a quick tile-based format. So you find a person, you choose the tiles, which are services you want to assign, and you assign them. And everything when they're assigned, the beauty of it is we can take the operating system of the phone, and you're not just recording a service. You're actually doing it. You're actually recording when it was done, who did it, you, and where you did it. And that all matters. And I'll explain that those are your known locations. Those are your interactions. That's part of you documenting that person's still homeless. So again, we don't lead with assessment and then tell people what they need. We ask them what they need and we give it to them. And if we can't, we can request help from others that might have the thing. So I remember during a Boston point in time count, I was out late. It was a guy that his feet were just in agony and he needed compression socks. And I didn't have compression socks. I'm a volunteer for the point in time count. And I tried to get I thought CVS was open 24/7. But so I was like trying to come back and help him out, and I had to cover my area. But I didn't have a way to say, this guy's in pain, he needs compression socks. But if I did, and someone else could come out, help me out, that'd be awesome. But that's just an example. Like sometimes when you're in the field, you don't have all the things that possibly anyone could ask for. It's just like, this is not reality. So if you don't have the thing, you can ask for help from someone else that might have the thing. And then it creates a request that can be followed up on.
Matt, there's a really great question in the chat that wasn't sure if you wanted to address.
Oh yeah.
Asking, can the info collected and show the way be transferred to HMIS seamlessly?
Yes, it can. It really depends on your HMIS vendor. We can send it. So a lot of with data integration, it's a handshake. And so the rules of the handshake is called the HUD CSV exchange format. And Symtec happened to author that exchange format for HUD when we were HUD technical systems providers. So we receive it all day long in our data warehouse, almostdata.com. We can submit it. Are they capable of receiving it? And so, but we individually will work with each vendor, and if they have issues, we know we can walk through it. But we know we can produce valid HUD CSV because we authored the format before, and we test our own work. So, but if there's ever a hangout, we work together. We can document. We can go back to the actually formal specifications. If anything's off, we can refer back to that. And if it's on the receiving end, we can say, well, here's the guidance. If it's on the sending end, we'll fix it. So yes, good question. All right. So encampments. So that's talking about things that don't exist in the HUD data standards. So encampments is not a data construct. And the other things that aren't data constructs right now are safe parking and safe sleeping too. Like these are realities that we have with the unsheltered population. So Symtec, we acknowledge those. We say the data standards are like the low bar and we have to do more. So let's talk about encampment decommissioning.
Hey Matt, just before you go on to encampments, there's just a follow-up question.
Sure.
So the data can be used to create intake in HMIS.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you were going to answer it.
Oh, sorry,
Yes, yes, it actually is.
yeah,
It can be your HMIS, and part of it is it is working with your vendor. So one of the issues that we may have is when someone has never been seen before. So so what we'll do is to start off the process is we'll receive all of your data into our warehouse, we'll ingest it, and then we'll take the client information and we can show the way with that. So you're already starting off with, this is my universe of people that we've known so far. Now, one of the things that has to be done when there's a new client that has never been seen in your HMIS before, and they're first being seen, we show the way, is we have to get a mechanism, or they have to have a mechanism when someone's new that they can add that client to their system. So it's very easy to say Matt Simmons is client 12345 from your current HMIS system. And then when we receive it, we take that, we honor that original source ID. We have our own. We can add service assessments, et cetera. But one of the things that happens if no one's ever interacted with before in the source HMIS, when we give back that new client, they have to be able to create a new client record. And that's something we can work through and guide them through. And some vendors are really good at it and some aren't, just straight up. And again, the backup for any of this is that we have the warehouse. And the warehouse can be, and people say, well, you know, a lot of times people say that it has to be in HMIS. But then you have to, then once you start pulling back the onion a little bit or peeling it back, the question is why? And you'll hear because we have to do the LSA. Okay, we can do that in the warehouse. We know we have to do system performance measures. Okay, we can do those in the warehouse. We need one list of everyone that's homeless in the community. Okay, we can do that in the warehouse. So we need performance analytics, the whole everything. The answer oftentimes is it doesn't need to get back in HMIS. It needs to be consolidated so you can have one holistic view of homelessness in your community. And if your vendor can't take it, don't worry. We could just use the warehouse and bring it all together there. And you're going to get more value out of the warehouse than most vendors anyway, because we're not just following the HUD minimum. So there's a lot more like tools in the warehouse than you will have in a traditional HMIS system. I know there's a long answer to something with like, but sometimes it's important to dig in and just call out some of the intricacies of this work. So things are up against, you know, there was the National Guard in DC. The National Guard came out to LA. National Alliance just sued HUD for the COC bills, NOFO. They won. Sweet. That's never been done. We've got the overturning of Martin versus Boise with Grants Pass. You've got the new executive order that came out. It really questions a lot of the work with Housing First. There is, and I'm going to pause there a little bit. We have to, as a mission, we need to make sure when we talk about homelessness is not a crime, but there are criminals that are housed and unhoused, and we can't pretend that they don't exist. So if we're trying to find that middle ground and move forward, it's important, I believe, that we make sure that we highlight that we're in tune with addressing crime. It's just we're not treating people as criminals for having their basic human needs being met. People need a place to sleep, a place to go to the bathroom. And if you don't provide those, they're not criminals, they're human. They're living organisms that need those things to survive. And we need to unpack that. And we also need to provide resources for those people that have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and provide supportive services. So to just do it blindly and arrest people, like you wouldn't do that for physical health issues, but we're conflating. It's still a medical issue. We need the time and resources to put towards it. So a little bit of soapbox, my apologies, but I get a little ramped up. So you're going to see these different state orders, city orders, et cetera, saying no camping, no camping, no camping. And part of why Martin versus Boise got overturned is the Grants Pass, they said it's unenforceable. And part of that is true because at the time we didn't have the tools and mechanisms to say we can enforce this. But that's what we're building. Because we want to be able to say there is safe, proximate, appropriate, and available beds nearby that we can document referrals have been made. Ideally, communities would have their own policies and procedures where you can say, we gave this person 3 attempts. We gave them notice. They didn't move on. That's when you can start doing citations. But you don't come in just storming in and just throwing away people's whole life's possessions, their medication, their IDs. Because or writing citations for and fines for things that they'll never be able to pay for. It's not productive. So basically we need to be able to say it is enforceable, and let's revisit this court ruling. Ideally, but we need certain communities to demonstrate this, elevate it up, and then we can push back. And then stuff like this. Once the rhetoric starts going so far in one direction. And so I hate even bringing this up but it happened on Friday, but we have to be aware in our space that this is happening. And it's absolutely disgusting, but there's an underpinning there of why that would ever come out of someone's mouth on public TV. And we have to try to get to the bottom of that And some people are fed up. And so just to unpack it, we have to make sure we do address crime. And that's different than addressing homelessness. They're not one and the same. One's housing status and one's someone's behavior. And if we can't lean too far and say, there's not an issue here, there's not crime, because that's not true either. But this is just absolutely deplorable. So what do we do? Well, fortunately, there are communities, and I'm glad to have Houston on, as one of our thought partners and leaders, and they've been with us for years now. I mean, ever since Hurricane Harvey, and Houston knew they had some problems with the unsheltered population. They had encampments, but they had a strategy, and the strategy really comes down to, so their strategies, it's in, we can put the link in the chat. We do have some people from Houston here. I haven't seen everyone, but I know Errol's here. Really, the importance of it is you don't just sweep. It's a process. You figure out first what encampments you have. You take inventory. Then you do site assessments. So when I say site assessments, you're going to go into the encampment with your outreach workers, and you're going to capture details about that place. Is it near a school? Is it in a floodplain? Is it a fire hazard? Is this person too close to public transportation, like train tracks, et cetera, that they're at risk to themselves? So, and it's the location information about it, and then it's the as of the day. So does it need trash abatement? Does it need, are we supporting a shelter in place model, like what's happened during COVID? If that's the case, is there a dumpster? Is there porta potties? Have they been cleaned out? Do they need attention? Are there sharps on the ground? Are there other hazards we have to pay attention to before I send my outreach workers in there or volunteers? So all those things go into a site assessment, but a site assessments can then be used for prioritization. So it's not just who has the most contacts in their Outlook. When they go to send an email to say, I need this encampment taken care of, I'm going to CC all my politicians and friends. It's based on fact. So there's no built-in bias. We have a scoring metrics. We have a process. And once an encampment's been identified, there's a process from there where we have a binding list of the people that are enrolled in the encampment. And it's enrolled. It's not really a concept, but it's taking the data, the HUD world at the encampment. And we have a move on strategy for each one, ideally. And there's a process. There's notices been given. There's, it could be, ideally, it's not 3 days, it's a month, 6 weeks, where you actually take it one step at a time. Does the person have identification? What are their needs? Do they have a pet? Do they have possessions? Do they have a partner? Do they have preference? Like the P's of, a person, so those matter too. So the A's matter too, the accessibility, availability, proximity, and being approximate, but so are the P's. So like we gather that information and we try to have a move on strategy for each person. You can't necessarily get everyone to say, I'm going to take that resource you're going to give me. But that's the goal, is you matching up people with resources. And then after time, if people know what's coming, they've had time to pack, to clean up their things, and either you help them move on or they move on their own. And then eventually the day comes. But it's not just a sweep. So please share the Houston guidance, but that's what we're using in the void of having guidance to, like, from the federal level. We work with communities that are thought leaders, and that's their guidance. So, and that's kind of the HUD TA model, so if anyone had received HUD TA, a lot of times the technical system providers will come in and say, well, this is what they're doing in fill in the blank city. And so that's what we have to do for our specs. So we get by name lists of people, and we can work the list down. And so the other part of the app is the command center. All the data goes somewhere, and it's the command center. And this is more of a management tool. So if you think about it, you've got the people in the field using an app on their phone, doing the data entry, getting information about the person, adding more details about it, recording their services, their needs, et cetera. And then you've got on the receiving end in the command center, the data comes in real time, and someone can see what's happening. And so we have these lists per encampment, and you can work the list. But keep in mind, think about the pit. All of a sudden, now you've got a list of everyone at an encampment, and you've got their demographics already. So you've already done the homework that was required for you to do for one day in the pit. You've already done all that. That's beautiful. So here's the site assessments we're talking about. I'm going to spend too much time. Again, if you want to see the full site assessment, there's you can look at the Houston guidance. And again, in all this work, this is a preview. This can be follow-on meetings. We can follow on demos, what have you. So just know that we're available. Request for assistance. This part is just next level. So if you need help, we have a way for you to request help from someone else, from another outreach provider, or for yourself. Both from the app. So this is from the app view, but also in this new web portal, which we built. Thank you for the support from Houston, that allows people to request assistance without having to be in the app. But once they go to fill out the form, which is customizable, they automatically get an account. They can then log in and follow on to the status of the request. So we're making those connections. That's the part. We're showing up. We're building a report. But we're also documenting the interaction locations and getting the known location data we need for the pit. And then on the receiving end, we have to manage all these requests that come in. So we've got, some are pretty quick. So people can, outreach worker can claim something. I got this. I'm going to take care of it. Others are more involved. They need someone to work the role of dispatch. And so that's going to take, some local understanding and oversight of who you have available to work with and different providers who have different skills and different services, different coverage areas. And it's almost like a help desk, but for people that need help. I mean, it's like a help desk for the tech, but it's more for people that need help. And those interactions and those responses keep people active on the binding list. And what I mean by that is people that are unsheltered, if you just enroll someone like the HUD world and you just leave that enrollment open, the population, if you look at trying to run a report, is going to keep increasing day over day for your provider. Because you don't tend to exit people out because you don't know if you're going to see them again. But instead, if we actually use the interactions and as a date and time stamp, and then we can subset the view of for your provider to say, just show me anyone that has interactions with the last 90 days. Then you don't have to worry about exiting people out. You can still do that if you want, but that's an arbitrary construct because you don't necessarily know what their exit destination is. You just know that you're no longer seeing them anymore. But as soon as you exit them out, like next day, like they show up again. So people are like, I'd rather just keep them active for a while in case I need to add a service. So again, it's like these data constructs create these issues, but instead you can just apply business logic to the data that we do have by capturing your transactional data, and then you'll have more of an idea of who's almost at any point in time. All right, so the hybrid count. All right, we had a pause. Any questions before I get into this? All right.
Very good.
All right, let's rock. All right. Bristol, Mass. So Bristol County. So used to be Attleboro, Taunton. There's one continuum of care, and then it was New Bedford, another. So South Coast, Massachusetts. So for people that a little closer to Rhode Island where I lived. But just to give you an idea, and I think we may have some people from the area here. So they had coordinated entry teams and street outreach teams gather data using ShoulderWay throughout, so that was an ongoing process. Then pre-merger, that was New Bedford area. Attleboro, which is, further north, they used Counting Us. We can take the data from people that were using Counting Us, so volunteers, surveyors. You don't have to have an account. You can't fetch information back from the server from Counting Us. and take the data from Show the Way, where there is that bi-directional communication of data, and bring it together. And that's what we did. So started off by bringing in this case, their HMIS vendor was Caseworthy. We ingested into the warehouse, mapped over all the key information into Show the Way. From there, we created a simple survey just for the pit to get the information about the living situation. And there's a couple key data points that we want to make sure we capture fresh. In homeless history and disabling conditions, are those things that we don't make sure we get it. So a very shortened survey. It's not the full survey instrument with all the demographics, because you already have that. You can add to it if something's missing, but ideally you have the majority of it. So in that area, New Bedford, they went out in those areas and they did the short survey, using Show the Way. Attleboro Taunton, the northern part, they use Counting Us, and like most of you are used to, and then we bring the two together. So the ongoing data capture was Show the Way. Hope you can see this. So this is a client lookup function. We're saying now you can search for a client. If you don't find them, you can create the client. Ideally, you do find them. It's a very short survey instrument. A lot of this fast. And it's literally, have you already been interviewed? No. Where are you sleeping? And then a few extra questions. Homeless history. So this is part of the chronic definition, and then all of your salient condition questions. And that's it. Much shorter than the full-blown survey. And just in the future, as you get more transactional data, there is the opportunity to not have to ask those questions at all and to simply take attendance. Because if we have the transactional data, we can determine chronic homelessness from the data. A data-derived, not self-reported at entry definition of chronic homelessness. So going back to your $1 million Murrays, the transactions are the ones that are going to document the homeless history. And going back to the other side of it, if there's no interactions, they become inactive. Okay. So this is just really just so you can see the abridged survey. So it's a sleeping location, and again, it's conditional logic. So if you say an outdoor encampment, what kind of structure? Oh, it's a tent. How many people in the tent with you? And so for that, if you use the vehicle makeshift shelter report, so you have a vehicle makeshift shelter tally, say you identify 42 RVs. Well, how many people are, should we multiply that by? We do the local multiplier based on that figure. So that's a different report. It's part of PIT, but just so you know, we can build up the data to inform the estimates. Homeless history, there's a fair amount that goes into that. Have you been first time homeless? Yes, no. If no, you're asking about episodes of length of homelessness, disabling conditions, that long indefinite qualifier matters for chronic homeless definition. And then any notes, and you're done. And then afterwards, we can take the data and we can bring it together. So in our response framework, so when I say response framework, we use service-oriented architecture, meaning we have different discrete objects that do the things they do very well. If you already have a community HMIS and you need, that's all golden, we can take the data from it. Show the Way, it's really focused on the unsheltered homeless population, and we're moving more towards the high turnover emergency shelters as well, like transactional data and safe parking programs too, and safe sleeping if that happens. So it's that high turnover, who's like my emergency room homelessness, is really focused well for Show the Way, because it's something you need to capture quickly. You're not going to be hold on, let me fire up my desktop. It's not the world. And then that's for people that have accounts. So they're trusted, they're in the trust group. And then you've got volunteers using Counting Us. And so between all of them, we can bring the data together, you duplicate it in the warehouse, and produce the reports. And so when I say the reports, yeah, we can do things like data quality scorecards. So this is an example of what I was talking about with outreach. That ski jump that happens for almost all outreach programs is because people keep getting enrolled and you'll get exited. And so that's why we say, you know what? We're not going to even look at that. We're going to look at activity levels, and then it smooths it out, because you're not looking at this arbitrary construct of entries and exits. People don't exit if you don't see them. You don't know to exit them. And then data completion rates, by the way, ideally you work to get those tight. And you can use all these data points can be used for your rating and ranking too, and your performance evaluations. So data gets ingested. This is a by name list. example, and we have inflows and outflows at the top. So who's already active, who's newly identified, who returned to active, any housing placements, other exits. And that number in the top right is your PIT count for the last day if you have comprehensive coverage, the actively homeless population. So, and then that area in red that circled the rounded rectangle, ID inactive clients, you can click on that and it's going to bring your list down and basically just look, and you can have a community-based rule. Oftentimes we see 90 days, and it will hide anyone that from the data that hasn't been seen in 90 days. Maybe it's 30. You can play with that and you can figure out what works locally. Part of the key difference in our work is we're not enrolling people into a project and just being done with it. We're rolling people into a project over time based on the interactions that are GPS enabled. So the beauty of that is with geospatial reporting capabilities, which we have, we can not just create a giant list for your entire balance of state continuum of care for quarry entry. We can do it by community. Here's my homeless population in this town with this mayor that wants to know what's going on, or this school district, because we've got, you could be doing, school transportation studies where you're like, we've seen this in my home state, former home state of Massachusetts, where kids were getting bused outside of their school district, or they're getting placed, and they had to get bused back and forth to the tune of $20 million a year because there was no consideration for where you're putting the person and the family. So No Child Left Behind Act, they say they can go back to the school of origin. And guess who picks up the tab? The school systems. That's teachers' salaries that are going towards transportation that isn't needed. But you can fix that if you know where people are from and where they're being placed. So we can apply the data scrubbing rules. We can take care of overlapping enrollments. We can take care of inactive. We can bring data from both HMIS and Show the Way, which is an HMIS together. So, your HMIS and Show the Way, I should say. We can do automated prioritization for CE. The vulnerability indexes that are out there typically have bias. So how do you get rid of that bias? You can lean on transactional data. If you still want to do a vulnerability assessment, there's potential we can incorporate that. But most people that have the wherewithal, if they know that the higher score is going to get them more likely to get in housing, they're going to say whatever they need to say. It's survival. So we can, and there's also the idea of the homeless history. If they're going to say, well, I've been homeless and it's the state next to us for 20 years, do they get to jump the line in your community when you've got someone that you've seen there day in and day out for 15 years? So there's a lot more that can be done. And ideally, you're simplifying the whole process for everyone by just using existing data. No additional, data entry fatigue. We can do all the HUD reports once it's ingested. And then we have the performance monitoring and evaluation. Like, how well are we doing it? So you can see your inflows, you can see your outflows, but beyond that, you can work the list, and then you can create, from there. So you had that, it's the inactive piece. This is a demonstration from today that we just uploaded results to Sage, and it worked. So when I say Sage, it's like testing the APR. So this is Nathan. I don't know if you knew that I was going to post this in here, but I did. So well done. Performance analytics. Like, what are you doing with the data? So if anyone's tried LSA, there's Stella that's behind locked doors. It's a huge pain in the ass to get your data into the system. There's always added checks and everything. What do you do for your APRs? So annual performance, we can actually create data viz off of running hundreds, if not thousands of APRs. It's behind the scenes. No one's doing, you're not doing it. You're not keying in data. And we can do it by target population. We can do it by race. We can do it by gender. We can do it by veterans for chronic. And you can see if there's disparities. You can also use it as a way to a public lens to see like who is causing an undue influence on our overall length of homelessness. What are the outcomes for these providers? Who's doing well? Use it for peer-to-peer benchmarking, use it to help, elevate the ones that are doing great. Maybe they can share lessons learned. But all the same data points are used for the NOFO rating and ranking. So when it comes time for NOFO, they're not surprised if they don't get funded.
Hey,
if you're a D or F student throughout the year, you don't wait till and you find that out, because you keep getting, and your teacher keeps telling you, eventually you're going to get told, okay, you didn't pass.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
We have like 1 or 2 minutes left, just FYI.
All right. Well, I think that's the high level. I think core entry and pit, and this is like to the last slide. So actually, we did think we did really well with timing. Are we serving our is core entry serving the population that is the highest utilizers of services? When I say services, I mean like everything in the community. So a lot of times we have these doors that people have to go to, and it's a false construct, and we're not going to people and saying you're part of the system. We create a new, project type. You have to be enrolled in it, do an intake, all those other steps. That those steps might be precluding people from actually being part of your core entry system. So it's not servicing the highest utilizers. So I think that's actually really, and you look at PIT versus HMIS, you see that most, especially in California, abhorrent rates of data capture, in the sense of like, you get a quarter of it. So we've done maps before. I might have hidden a slide, but that's it. I mean, that's the whole approach. Any questions? We have some time. I'll stay on. My apologies for getting excited, but we started 5 minutes late, so I feel like I was pretty on time. Oh, thanks, Adam.
Can someone from the team drop our support or like our contact info in the chat? And then, yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free.
Absolutely. Yeah, reach out to us. I mean, this is a labor of love. We're in it. So you don't have to have a contract. You don't, you have ideas, you have things that we might be able to improve. Let us know. We don't have it all figured out, anyone, but we're learning 20 some odd years later, still learning. So, please, by all means, constructive feedback is appreciated. And if you're interested and you want a demo, private demo, you want pricing for show the way, just reach out and we'll get it to you. It's pretty simple. It's straightforward. It's just based on the number of users. Okay. Well, thank you very much for those who attended. I look forward to talking and working with some of you. The PIT count comes up. If you need a PIT contract too, just, if we haven't sent one to you yet, reach out. We'll get one to you. All right. Well, thank you all. Have a great day.